Rochester, New York has one of the most amazing underground best-kept secrets. This video will take you on a bizarre urban exploring journey which starts from early subway systems, will introduce President Truman's Nazi American scientists, human experiments with radioactive plutonium and uranium injections that killed over 200 Americans, secret classified Manhattan Project which employed 150,000 Americans who had no clue that they were being exposed to radiation and building atomic bombs, Eastern Kodak Film Company's involvement, the unprotected storage of almost pure uranium-235 hidden and unprotected under the Rochester city, which may have been enough uranium to blow the city of Rochester to Pluto, and finally, the secret society meetings that closed down Rochester's underground subway system in 1956. It started in London, England in 1863 with the Metropolitan Railway steam engines which smoke-filled the underground tunnels. Later, in 1886, New York opened up a cable-hauled railway system that did not work very well. In 1890, London had the first electric train, and soon after, subways opened up all over the world, including New York City, Philadelphia, Chicago, and Boston. In 1927, Rochester opened their underground railway system called Subway. This 10-mile-long, 25-stop subway ran from General Motors through the city of Rochester to Rowlands, with one of its underground subway stops being located at Kodak Park. Which brings us to our first classified top-secret underground bizarre story. In August 1942, the U.S. government created the top-secret and classified Manhattan Project, which would eventually employ 150,000 Americans who worked for big corporations such as DuPont, Furcleaves, Union Carbide, and Eastern Kodak. These American patriots were never told about being exposed to radiation, nor were they told that they were building atomic weapons. Many would become sick, ill, and die from radiation or complications caused by radiation. In August of 1945, two atomic bombs called Fat Man and Little Boy were ordered to be dropped by President Truman, despite the plea from Albert Einstein and despite the fact that Japan had already discussed with Russia about surrendering. President Truman, along with the U.S. government, knew that Japan wanted out of World War II, but dropped the two nuclear bombs regardless, killing thousands of people and polluting Japan with radiation. The Eastman Kodak Company atomic bomb manufacturing facility was located in Kingsport and Oak Ridge, Tennessee. However, the main Kodak headquarters was located only several blocks from the Rochester underground subway system, with one of the subway stops ending at Kodak. So Kodak had access to the underground tunnels and rooms where they could have easily stored radioactive uranium or plutonium. Eastman Kodak also played a key role in the diabolic human experiments, injecting radioactive polonium, plutonium, and uranium into Rochester uninformed public to study the effects of radiation exposure. Eastman Kodak, with the help of the University of Rochester, injected uninformed patients who visited hospitals, telling them that the injections were therapeutic. These deadly human experiments were also done at the universities of California, Chicago, and at the Oak Ridge Army Hospital. It is estimated that over 200 people were injected, which ultimately resulted in death. The first injection was done in 1945 to Ed Cabe, a healthy worker at the Oak Ridge nuclear facility who got into a car wreck breaking one arm and one leg. These death doctors injected Ebe with radioactive plutonium. Later they pulled 15 teeth and took bone samples. Ebe was so mad after they pulled his teeth that he snuck out of the hospital never to return. They found his body dead several years later from radiation poisoning. The reason I call them death doctors is because many were. When Hitler disappeared in Argentina after World War II, America and Russia gobbled up Hitler's 3,000 Nazi doctors and Nazi scientists with roughly 1,500 of these Nazis coming to the U.S. to run NASA, Area 51, mental health institutions, perform human experiments in mental institutions, work for the CIA, and also help in lobotomizing over 60,000 Americans. The U.S. government is no sacred cow when it comes to playing God or experimenting with their civilians. Between 1907 and 1960, 17 states participated in the sterilization of 60,000 mostly black females. Between 1960 and 1980, U.S. sterilized another 30,000 mostly black and American Indian females. Then between 1973 and today, over 30 million American fetuses have been aborted. Even today, if you are a black fetus, you have a whopping chance of 50% being aborted at a Planned Parenthood facility or similar type clinic. They even make it easy because most of these clinics are in walking distance of most of our American inner cities. The eugenics programs continue in America today, and I'm quite sure our kids will not be reading about this in their history books. So why did they close the Rochester Subway? In 1955, Rochester city officials told the public that the city council voted in a secret meeting to discontinue the subway service because of the right-of-way space needed for the I-490 freeway. They closed and abandoned the subway in 1956. When the Manhattan Project shut down, they had to move the radioactive uranium and plutonium to other bomb-making facilities. Well, maybe they didn't move all of it. Kodak brought some high weapons grade uranium-235 back home to their headquarters and other facilities, which were all located in Rochester, New York. It wasn't until 2006, many decades later, that Kodak fessed up to storing close to 4 pounds of weapons grade uranium-235 under the heavily populated city of Rochester. Kodak fessed up to only having 4 pounds. Maybe it was really 400 pounds. We will never know. Regardless, even 4 pounds is enough to kill every governmental leader in the world in one day. Just like when they murdered the Russian spy Alexander Litvinenko by slipping 1 drop of radioactive plutonium into his tea. Kodak is no stranger when it comes to toxic pollution. Remember the 19 million gallons of Agent Orange dioxin, which was spread over Vietnam, affecting 3 million Vietnamese, including 150,000 children who were born with birth defects? Well, Kodak has been incinerating and releasing massive amounts of dioxin substance into the Rochester atmosphere and into the Kodak Park environment, causing major sickness to employees and people living in the Rochester area. Additionally, Kodak may be partially responsible for the major sickness, cancer and leukemia, occurring at the Niagara Falls Love Canal neighborhood. Rochester is ranked number 1 in the U.S. for overall release of carcinogenic chemicals and having one of the highest cancer death rates. Many children living near Kodak plant have brain cancer, many cars have fading paint, and a lot of the groundwater is contaminated with methanol chloride. So let's think about why they really shut down the Rochester subway in 1956 during the same era of the Cold War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the era of atomic bomb manufacturing. What other things were they doing underground for the last 30 years with the hidden unprotected uranium-235? So now you have to ask a few questions. Were the city council's secret meetings conducted to close the underground Rochester subway so Kodak could use some of the subway tunnels for the storage of uranium-235? Did Kodak have much more than the admitted 4 pounds of highly enriched or almost pure uranium-235? Generally, if the government admits something to the public, you probably have to multiply the severity of it by 20. Did Kodak file Chapter 11 because many of the Kodak employees died, were sick, or were dying from radiation and other Kodak pollution? And is the Rochester Underground abandoned subway radioactive? Well, one thing for sure, the government never lies to us. So if there were any other secrets pertaining to the underground subway system or other contamination issues, they would certainly tell us. Unless, of course, they wanted to build more atomic bombs.